and welcome to this presentation on the initial findings of the reality of being an enterprise and entrepreneurship educator, a research project conducted by Enterprise Educators UK. I, Dr. Emily Beaumont, President-elect of EE UK, will be taking you through the initial findings of this project. The aim of this project, the reality of being an enterprise and entrepreneurship educator, is to truly understand our members and what they do. Using the IOEE Enterprise and Entrepreneurship Educator Standards, EE UK have developed 3 pathways to showcase the enterprise educator's professional background: the academic, practitioner, and influencer. These pathways act as ideal types, a Weberian concept, which according to Heckman has a purpose to provide means of comparison with concrete reality in order to reveal the significance of that reality. In spring of this year, we began with stage 1 of this research project, which consisted of an online quantitative survey, and it is this data that we will be looking at today. However, we will also be discussing what might happen at stage 2 and the potential of qualitative methods such as focus groups or interviews. For those of you not familiar with the EE UK Fellowship Pathways, more information can be found on this slide or by visiting our website. EE UK have created a national award in the fellowship that is built upon the competencies for an enterprise educator outlined as the IOEE National Occupational Standard for Enterprise Educators. To summarise, EE UK has used the IOEE standards to underpin their 3 different professional pathways to fellowship. Beginning to now look at the data, we see that we had 116 respondents to our survey, of which 96.6 were from organisations based in the UK. The pie chart in the top right-hand corner breaks down what type of institutions these respondents came from, and where other was selected, this was organisations such as the British Council, QAA, or Advanced HE. Question 3 asked respondents to identify which of the following job titles, taken from the IOEE standards, was their primary enterprise or entrepreneurship education role. The EE UK Fellowship allocates these job titles to a fellowship route, and the results of the respondent by fellowship route can be seen in the pie chart. These identities remained with the respondents throughout the remainder of data analysis. We have to be mindful, however, that the breakdown of respondents by fellowship route may not be representative of the EE UK community, as those who completed the survey self-selected rather than being selected as a representative sample. We do not have robust data on the actual breakdown of the EE UK community, in particular from our associate members, and this is something we should potentially pursue to validate this data in the future. Question 5 asked, which of these, listed at the bottom of the slide and including other, best describes your primary focus? The 3 statements are key areas of the IOEE National Occupational Standards for Enterprise Educators. EE UK has assigned each of these key areas to one of their pathways to highlight what the majority of that pathway's work will entail. For example, planning and delivering effective enterprise and entrepreneurship curricula is assigned to the academic. Motivating and inspiring learners in developing enterprise and entrepreneurial mindsets, behaviours and skills is assigned to the practitioner, and building collaborative relationships with learners, educators and other stakeholders is assigned to the influencer. There are clearly dominant primary foci for each identity, with both the academic and the influencer aligning with previous understanding of their primary focus, supporting these pathways as potential ideal types. But this is not the case for the practitioner, and further exploration of this role is required to understand why. However, each pie chart also highlights the spread of focus found in each identity, beyond their primary focus, a point that suggests far more complexity in each identity. Question 6 listed 18 individual standards and competencies taken from the IOEE standards and asked respondents to indicate which of these feature in your current role as an enterprise or entrepreneurship educator. Respondents were asked to tick all that apply. As you can see, as we look at each of the 3 identities that the respondents were sorted into, there are some interesting differences between the experience of the academic, the practitioner, and the influencer. Seen more clearly here as we overlay the data in this chart. Question 7 asked about time allocated to the standards and competencies that the respondents had selected at question 6. Respondents were asked to rank these in terms of the time they allocated to each of these in their role. As there were 18 standards and competencies, we have allocated a score of 18 where the respondent ranked 1, reducing by 1 for each position. If the respondent did not rank one of these standards or competencies, then the score was 0. As you can see, this further emphasises the differences between each of the 3 identities. However, more analysis is required to truly understand what these differences are and how they occur. Question 8 asked the respondents to identify 3 to 5 of the competencies that they perceive to be the most critical and key in executing their role to a high standard. Once again, the results intensified the difference between each of the 3 identities, the academic, the practitioner, and the influencer. Further data analysis is now required to not only understand why each identity has different critical standards and competencies, but also to consider the time allocated to each of these standards and competencies and see whether there is a significant or interesting difference between the 2. This will help us understand the realities of being an enterprise or entrepreneurship educator. It is now time to summarise these initial findings presented here today in this session. From this initial data, we can see that each identity or pathway has a dominant focus. For the academic, this is planning and delivering effective enterprise or entrepreneurship curricula. For the practitioner and influencer, this is building collaborative relationships with learners, educators, and other stakeholders. However, there is clearly evidence of each identity or pathway working across the 3 foci and highlighting other areas of focus beyond those stated. When considering the IOEE standards and competencies, we can see that each identity or pathway operates with a different mix and level of standards and competencies. Despite each identity or pathway having a specific mix and level of standards and competencies, when focusing on time allocated, there were clearly some standards and competencies that demanded or necessitated more time over others. Asking respondents to designate their most critical standards created further clear differences across all 3 identities and pathways, bringing into sharp relief what lies at the core of the academic, practitioner, and influencer's reality. There is clearly some further analysis and exploration of this data required. This includes collecting data concerning the identity of our associate members to validate the respondent identity data found within this survey to confirm whether a representative sample has been achieved. We need to look at whether the data regarding primary focus is statistically significant and what this reveals about the reality of each identity or pathway as a potential ideal type for the sector. We need to look more critically at the mix and level of standards and competencies for each identity and pathway. And there needs to be a comparison of time allocation to standards and competencies versus what respondents deem are critical. Finally, once analysis at stage 1 has been completed and there are clear conclusions, we will look to move to stage 2, where we hope to gain a richer understanding and perspective on the reality of being an enterprise or entrepreneurship educator by speaking directly to our members. Thank you for listening to this presentation on the initial findings of our research project, the reality of being an enterprise and entrepreneurship educator. As you can see, further data analysis is to take place and there is the potential for stage 2. So please watch out for further presentations or reports from EE UK on this topic in the future. Goodbye.